Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing today? So I am going to get right into this. I hope everybody's having a great Wednesday. So I'm not going to take too long. I'm going to get right into this. And before I get started, I have to read a disclaimer. So let me do that first. The opinions in this video are solely and exclusively the opinions of Fredrick D. Scott in his individual capacity. The opinions in this video are in no way, shape, or form the opinions of the National Action Network or any other organizations that Fredrick D. Scott is directly or indirectly affiliated with, nor are they the opinions of any organizations mentioned in this video. So with that said, this is a hashtag Get Real Woke discussion on my opinion of the Samaria Rice interview. So before I get started, I want to be very clear that my heart goes out to everyone that has lost a loved one due to the egregious policing practices and tactics which have disproportionately been carried out against our community. As someone who has children, I cannot begin to imagine how I would feel if I lost one in the same manner. Justice should be had, and more, police who are the cause of these issues should be held accountable. Better policies, procedures, and legislation should be put in place that would make these types of actions a federal felony crime by which a mandatory minimum sentence should apply. Okay. So here we go. Recently, about a week or so ago, Samaria Rice, the mother of Tamirrice, made comments and statements on social media, which culminated in her doing an interview regarding those comments and statements. In the interview, she asserts, among other things, that shaunking owes her money because she heard that he raised $100,000 and only gave her $60,000. She also asserts that Black Lives Matter, Tamikadmallory, mysonne, shaunking, Benjamin Crump, etc. are profiting from the death of her son, that they are clout chasers who have done nothing for her or her son in the way of securing justice for either. She went further to say that they have done nothing for her at all. As a result of her statements, several others on social media have come out and given their own opinions and what they feel are facts surrounding this discussion, and have attempted to draw parallels between these people and other organizations that also fight for social justice reform, with the summation that none of them do anything for the community and are only around for money, clout, and status. As a result of everything I've seen on social media, I have elected to weigh in on this discussion because as a committee member of the National Action Network Second Chance Committee here in New York, I have insider knowledge and perspective. Additionally, as someone who does have a private family foundation, I have quite a bit of expertise on how such organizations work. Finally, as someone who has had their name, reputation, accomplishments, body of work, etc. attacked and defamed, I know how this feels firsthand. So I'm going to unpack this point by point. So the first thing I want to address is the fact that shaunking owes money to Samaria Rice, according to Samaria Rice. Okay, so let's get into that. So she said that she heard that he had raised $100,000 and he had only given her $60,000. And so she feels like he owes her some money. So first of all, what a person hears about what was raised is not substantiated fact and not meritable to make such a serious accusation. Moreover, if I jump into this a little further and a little deeper, right? Samaria Rice has no affiliation with shaunking or shaunking's foundation. She's not on the board. She does not have an ongoing grant or donation commitment from shaunking. And shaunking's overall platform, right? His organization, his platform, everything he does is about the overall fight for social justice and criminal justice reform. That's what his whole platform is about. So that's who shaunking is and what shaunking does. This is what he does day to day. He writes about this stuff. He blogs about this stuff. He does live streams, video logs, all kinds of different things on social media and out in the community to raise awareness and community organize in the fight for overall social justice reform. So with that in mind, right, of course, with everything that has happened, with all of the police brutality, the egregious policing practices that have been employed in our community, and the subsequent deaths that have occurred because of that, in an effort to raise awareness and highlight issues that are poignant and demonstrate the need for social justice reform, of course, the unfortunate and heartbreaking situation of Tamirrice was used as an example of what is happening to our community due to egregious policies and practices being employed against our community, and to demonstrate the need for social and criminal justice reform. However, just because a situation was used as an example does not render or necessitate compensation to the family. In fact, if we take this a step further, from a legal standpoint, because when you look at a thing, you look at it, first of all, from a legal standpoint, and then second of all, you look at it from a moral standpoint, right? So from a legal standpoint, Shaunking actually didn't have to give Samaria Rice anything. He owed her nothing under the law. He has an organization, he has a platform that he uses to raise awareness and fight for criminal and social justice reform within our community. So monies donated to his organization are used for the purpose of continuing to raise awareness and advance the objectives of that organization toward the ends of social justice and criminal justice reform, period. Shaunking chose to give her 60 grand. That was a moral choice that he made. It was something that he felt in his heart that he wanted to do to support the family in their difficult time. It was not legally obligated of him to do that. And so for Samaria Rice to level such a serious accusation as to say that the gentleman Shaunking owes her money is wrong. It's wrong. And it's hurtful, because what you're doing here is you are defaming and undermining the reputation and credibility of this man, when all this man tried to do was be there in support of your family because of the situation that your family was going through. So I wanted to touch on that first, because that part is very, very important. Now, here's the other thing, and this is very important too. Let's say that Samaria Rice has a copyright on the name Tamirrice. Let's say she has a copyright, and she were to say, well, because these different organizations are using my son's name and I own a copyright on that name, then I should be compensated, or my organization should be compensated for them using my son's name, as an example. That actually doesn't hold weight either, because of an exemption under the Copyright Act. It's called fair use. And that's Section 109 of the Copyright Act. And so, that exemption is very clear. Fair use is very clear. And for anyone who doesn't know what fair use is, I would encourage you to read Section 109 of the Copyright Act. And so these organizations using her son's name, image, and likeness as an example in the fight for overall social and criminal justice reform would qualify as fair use under the Copyright Act. So even if she has a name copyrighted, it would not entitle her to any compensation. So I wanted to talk about that first and foremost, because I think that is very important. And I can tell you that you will find no legal statute or precedent court ruling to say otherwise, to dispute what I'm telling you right here. Like, these are the facts of the situation. And in a situation, such a delicate situation where emotions are high, on both sides at this point, I like to come in and lay out the facts as they are, right? Because I think that's very, 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 very important. Now, one of the other things she said was that no one is supporting her with her community center. So, and I'm not sure what she meant. It sounded like she was saying no one's giving her any monetary support to help her build her community center. But before there can be monetary support, now I want you to know that that's how it came off to me. They may not be what she meant, but that's how it came off to me. It sounded, when I listened to the interview, it sounded like she was saying that nobody was giving her any monetary support for her community center. And if that's what the inference was, if that was in fact the inference that she was trying to make, then I have to ask some questions. Like, okay, so before anybody can give money toward an endeavor, especially a philanthropic endeavor, there's a lot of steps that come before people give money, right? Like, okay, has it been set up properly? Have you thought about the different types of policies and procedures that you would need to have in place to be able to run a community center, especially one that's going to be dealing with children? Have you thought about the fact that you're going to have specific types of insurance in place? So in the event that something does happen, you are covered. Have you thought about the fact that you're going to have some sort of background check software in place as well to be able to run backgrounds on all of the people that are going to be interacting with these children? Because again, these are children. Have you thought about the disclosures and disclaimers that you're going to have to put in place in your agreements and in your programs and all of those things? Have you documented all of those things? Have all of those things been prepared? Do you have a board that has sufficient credibility and competency to be able to run this type of a center? Have you structured a community development corporation for which could own this center? These are things that would have to be in place. Have you done a pro forma cost projection of what it exactly is going to cost to get this center up, operational, functional, with all of the right things that it has to have in place to be able to operate in not only a safe manner, but in a productive manner? See, because before you expect anyone to provide you monetary support, if in fact that's what you were saying when you were saying no one was providing, you support, before you can get that kind of monetary support, there are all these other things that have to come first. And the interesting thing is, and I say this all the time, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's not what you do, but how you do it. And I'm quite sure, with all of the people that were raising awareness, that were, that are fighting for social justice and reform and criminal justice reform, there are plenty of people that could have come in if you just simply reach out to someone and ask, hey, I need help structuring this because I want to be able to get this off the ground. I'm pretty sure that there are several people that have been more than happy to come in and help you get that structured properly. And not only that, you would have been shocked to find that there would have been people that would have given you money to help you get it off the ground once it was structured properly. For example, right? Short of this interview, had I have heard about the community center and someone had reached out to me to assist you with the community center, I would have done it free. Not only would I have done it free, I would have carried the cost of what it will take to get everything structured the right way to be able to get you to a position to where you can actually launch and open a community center. I would have been more than happy to do something like that at no cost, pro bono. But because of the way the interview came off and because of the way it sounds and because of the way it came across, at this point, even me would, and I don't know you from a can of paint, but just based on how this situation has played, I would have high reservations in working with you at this point, because I would be concerned about how that would go, how that interaction would turn out. And that's what happens when you do and say certain things, you alienate, people that could really help you and support you. And I think that's the situation here. So now, I want to talk about, tamikadmallory. I want to talk about my son, Benjamin Carr, Black Lives Matter, Intel Freedom, etc. Because they do social activism work. That's what they do. Now, what is social activism work? I want to talk about that. So social activism work takes on many different forms. It takes on many different forms. It comes to raising awareness. Just getting out in the street, raising awareness is social activism. Getting the conversation started is social activism, right? Will Smith made a quote. He made a quote, and I can't think of it exactly the way he said it, but essentially what he was saying is that things haven't gotten better, they're just being filmed. So Will Smith said that, and the interesting thing about that is he was right. The only thing that's changing and is that now, we're able to record those things that the police officers are doing to our community. And because of that, it's giving us more of a framework to be able to raise awareness and to get out there and show proof of what's happening. It's no longer hearsay. No, these are the facts. Here's the recording. You see what I'm saying? So that, and so when you really look at this situation, right, 10 years ago, if something like this had have happened, this unfortunate thing that happened to young Tamir, if this was 10 years ago, right, and there are no organizations like Black Lives Matter, like National Action Network, like the Rainbow Coalition, like, Until Freedom, something like this happens, it doesn't get that national media attention. Unfortunately, when things happen to African Americans, we don't get the same play in the media as people who, are of other demographics, more specifically Caucasian demographics. We don't get the same play. So in order for that to become a national thing, right, somebody had to raise the awareness. Somebody had to get out there in those streets. Somebody had to fight for it. Someone had to have the right relationships to be able to get the media attention, to make this a conversation, to make these things a discussion. So what people like tamikadmallory and Benjamin Crump and Black Lives Matter and Until Freedom and even mysonne to an extent, what they're doing is they're keeping your son's name in the hearts and minds of the people. Media influences decision. And so by keeping these memories in people's hearts and people's minds, people are beginning to wake up and see and demand social justice reform, criminal justice reform. That is the intangible benefit that I don't think people are really looking at. People are putting their names and reputations and lives on the line every single day. These people getting death threats and everything to fight for this social justice reform, to fight for this criminal justice reform. And we got to respect that as well. We got to respect that. So you got to understand that, what happened to your son is very unfortunate. It's very personal to you because that's your son. And I get that. I understand that because I have children. And if something like that happened to one of mine, God only knows how I would feel. But understand that that is one example in a series of examples for why we need social justice reform. The social justice reform movement is much bigger than just one situation. It is a collective of situations. It is a situation and the desire for social justice reform is something that has spawned out of 400 years of oppression, disenfranchisement, mass incarceration, very, very, just a lot of things. So this is a culminating event. Your son's unfortunate situation is just one example that has been used as a way to demonstrate why it is that we need social justice reform, why people need to sit up and pay attention, why we need to be here in these streets fighting, why we need to be donating dollars to this, why we need to be fighting for legislative reform and policy reform. And that's the reality. That's the facts. We have to look at the overall situation to really understand what people are really out here in these streets fighting for. And fighting for social justice reform and criminal justice reform and things like that, it's not cheap. In order to get reform, guess what? It costs money to organize a community. It costs money to get out there and organize people and make t-shirts and make banners and feed people and give people water while they out there walking around protesting. It costs money to organize a sit-in, to get the permits that you need. It costs money to be able to begin to form policy and form legislation that can pass, that can get to the House of Representatives floor, that can get to the Senate floor to be discussed and voted upon. It costs money to do those things. It's not cheap. So when you hear a thing like, oh, Black Lives Matter raised $90 million. Okay. Why don't you just ask where the $90 million went? Because if they're a nonprofit organization, if they're structured as a foundation, they file a 990 every year. You don't even have to ask them. You can pull the 990 and find out what's really going on. But people understand that when you're fighting against a social construct that has been designed, it has been woven into the very fabric of this country, by people that now have trillions of dollars at their disposal to keep this social construct alive, $90 million is nothing in the fight. It's nothing. It is nothing. It is a drop in the bucket. It must be deployed strategically. It must be deployed strategically to the overall initiative of bringing about social justice reform. Period. It can't just be divvied to one person, one situation, one thing. It has to be divvied out and strategically employed to get the biggest impact for the dollar. That is what it is going to take to do this properly and to get the change that we need in this community. And I need people to understand that change does not come overnight. It doesn't come overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. I think people are looking for instant gratification in this social justice reform movement. That you just, okay, Black Lives Matter got started, so tomorrow everything's going to be different. No, that's not the case. We trying to overcome 400 years of oppression and disenfranchisement. A system that is, as I said before, woven into the very fabric of this country. That change is not going to come overnight. It is not. It is going to take time. There's an old adage that says Rome wasn't built in a day. And this change is not going to happen in a day. It's not going to happen in a month. It's not going to happen in 6 months. This takes time. But there are measurable things that happen along the way, mile markers. And I'm going to get into that in a second. The progress that has been made that you don't even see. Right? Okay. So let's get into something, right? Because a lot of this discussion and a lot of what Samaria Rice was saying centered around Tamikadmallory, right? And the fact that she was on the Grammys and, Samaria Rice felt a real way about that. She felt like, she used the term clout chaser, profiting from my son's pain, etc., etc. Let me give you a little background on Tamikadmallory, right? Just for everybody who doesn't know, let me give you a little background on Tamikadmallory. Number one, Tamikadmallory has been fighting for social justice in various capacities and various initiatives since she was 15 years old. She's 40 now. Think about that. She did not just show up. She's been here. Her ascension to the national stage of social activism has been hard fought and hard earned. She paid her dues, put in her time, and is being rewarded for her years of diligence, commitment, and hard work. I could see if she just popped up out of nowhere a year ago, 6 months ago, a month ago, you feeling a way about that. But this lady has been fighting for social justice reform in various capacities since she was 15. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. Let that lady get her shine. Let that lady get the things that are, because you need someone out there that has a platform of that size. Because the fact of the matter is, and this is the thing I need people to understand, for her to be able to even get on the Grammy stage and raise her hand and raise her voice and speak in a positive light towards social justice reform and raise awareness, that is a national stage. And it's not just black people watching the Grammys. It's white folks, Asian folks, Middle Eastern folks, all of them. Everybody watch the Grammys. So the fact that she could get on stage and raise awareness for our situation, our problems, and bring that awareness cross demographic is huge. It's huge because 10 years ago it wouldn't have happened. 5 years ago it wouldn't have happened, but it's happening today. And what people don't realize is the fact that she can even get on that stage, right, is because of the social activism work that has been done by not only Black Lives Matter, not only Intel Freedom, but predecessor organizations like the National Action Network, like the Rainbow Coalition, like the Nation of Islam, etc., etc. These are people that have fought and died so that young black woman can get on that stage and raise the kind of awareness that she's raising right now. That means the conversation is being heard, the conversation is being started. And in order to get things done, you first have to have a conversation. People have to be willing to hear what you have to say. And guess what? In 2021, people are sitting up and they're paying attention and they're listening. And that is a big deal. That is a big deal. It seems like nothing, but it's a huge thing. It is a huge step, a huge mile marker in the progress for social justice reform. And we need to acknowledge that. And instead of tearing that down, we need to be clapping for that. And that's real. Let me tell you about something else, right? I want to talk about progress. What is progress in social justice reform? What have been some of the things that have happened in social justice reform that you may not even know about? Has any of you guys heard of an ESG metric? Environmental, social, corporate governance. That's what ESG stands for. Environmental, social, and corporate governance. See, I come from Wall Street, so I can speak to this. I've seen this shift happen on Wall Street amongst major corporations. See, now when a company wants to go public, or they want to raise private capital, or they want to get big block investors, or anything like that, one of the metrics that a financial analyst looks at when they're doing evaluation of the company in today's society is their ESG. Their environmental, social, and corporate governance. And one of the metrics that they look for when they're looking at the social aspect of a business is diversity and inclusion. Do you have a well-written, well-structured diversity and inclusion policy? And how is that diversity and inclusion policy being carried out? And what are the results of that diversity and inclusion policy in your company? Do you have a diversity and inclusion officer? Is that diversity and inclusion officer part of the minority demographic? These are things that are weighed that weren't even weighed 5 years ago. Believe it or not, big block shareholders, large institutional investors are now holding corporations accountable in this way. They demand it. If you want to go public and raise capital, if you want to be taken seriously, that is, if you want to continue to increase your stock price, you better have a diversity and inclusion policy. Your ESG metric better be tight. But that wasn't a conversation 10 years ago. Hell, that wasn't a conversation 5 years ago. These things weren't even conversations. But because of social justice reform activists that are out there in those streets, right, these things are a conversation now. Corporations are being held accountable to these standards now. That's because of the social activism work that predecessor companies or predecessor organizations like National Action Network, like the Rainbow Coalition, like the Nation of Islam, the work that they did gave birth to the organizations like Black Lives Matter and Intel Freedom to be able to push these types of things. But these are things that you don't even know about, that you don't even hear about. But that's progress. How about the fact that law enforcement now has to wear body cameras? When police officers are out there in them streets, they got to have body cameras now. It's a law. You think that would have happened if social activists hadn't been in the street? Hadn't been raising awareness, hadn't been community organizing, hadn't been protesting, hadn't been doing sit-ins, hadn't been fighting for legislation that makes this type of stuff possible? Because they wasn't wearing body cams 5 years ago. They wasn't wearing body cams 10 years ago. Now it's a requirement. That is the power of social activism. That is reform, believe it or not. You may not see it, but that's reform. That is reform. How about cross-demographic acknowledgement and collaboration? The fact that now, right, a president of the United States will stand up and acknowledge, a Caucasian president of the United States will stand up and acknowledge that we have a racial issue in this country that needs to be fixed. Ronald Reagan certainly wasn't doing that. Let's be clear about that too. We've come a long way since Ronald Reagan, but that's because of organizations like the National Action Network, like the Rainbow Coalition, like the Nation of Islam, predecessor organizations, these were predecessor organizations. They gave birth to the organizations like Black Lives Matter, like Until Freedom. These organizations are what's making this possible. Cross-demographic acknowledgement and collaboration wasn't happening 10 years ago. It wasn't happening. But now it's happening. But that's because people are in the street fighting for this. People are in the boardrooms fighting for this. People are sitting in at Congress fighting for this. How about this? As I told you, right? I'm going to give you another one, right? How about this? So I'm a committee member for the National Action Network Second Chance Committee here in New York. How about we just got it through the House of Representatives and the Senate? They both passed a bill called the Halt Solitary Confinement Act, which will severely curtail solitary confinement in New York State prisons. It was a coalition of different organizations of which the National Action Network Second Chance Committee was a part of. We were part of raising awareness, which is community organizing. We were part of the protests and the sit-ins, the rallies. We were a part of the legislative development, the crafting of the legislation that got passed. That legislation right now is sitting on Governor Cuomo's desk, waiting to be signed. That legislation is now a framework that will give the same collaborative organizations an opportunity to attack this at the federal level. That wasn't happening 10 years ago. That wasn't happening 5 years ago. But because people out here in these streets, right? Because people out here raising awareness, right? These things are happening. But I bet you never heard about that, right? I bet you didn't even know that passed. Some of you may not even heard about it even if you live in New York. But it happened. You don't believe me? Google HALT Solitary Confinement Act. Halt Solitary Confinement Act and read about it. This is happening for real because of social activists out there in the street fighting for social activist reform and criminal justice reform. That's why this is happening, right? See, sometimes people get it in their minds that nothing's happening because they can't see any tangible results, not understanding, right, that there are tangible and intangible results. There are things that are happening that you can't see. And don't judge a situation just because you can't see it. Because what you got to understand about social activism reform, criminal justice reform, what you got to understand about that is it takes a lot of small steps. And a lot of small steps, a lot of intangible things are happening along the way. And those intangible small steps that are happening, those small progresses, those small victories, that's what turns into the big action and the big progress. It doesn't happen all in one shot. It's small steps. It's give and takes, right? That's how you get things done in a bipartisan environment. That's how it works. That's how it works. And so the fact of the matter is, when it comes to social justice reform, when it comes to criminal justice reform, you can't have an instant gratification mentality. You got to have patience. You got to have patience. You have got to have patience. But what you can't do along the way, just because, it ain't happening the way you think it should happen, or it's not happening as fast as you think it should happen, you can't tear down the people that are actually out there doing the work. Actually out there raising the awareness. Actually out there using their voices, using their platforms to bring about change. You can't do that. Because these very same people are fighting for you. See what I'm saying? So, to the armchair critics that jumped on this interview and made several videos about this interview and criticized the movement and criticized what's going on out there with Black Lives Matter and Intel Freedom, Tamikadmallory and all the other National Action Network and all the other organizations that are out here fighting on a regular basis, really doing this, which I can proudly say I'm one of the people out here in these streets really trying to do something, really trying to get things done right. So for all of y'all armchair critics out there, I just want to ask you a couple of questions if I can, okay? What are you doing in this fight for social justice reform? What are you doing? What time have you dedicated to community organizing, protesting, sit-ins, rallies, etc.? What substantive financial contribution have you made to help advance the fight? What policy or legislation have you helped craft that will benefit our community? It's a funny thing, right? So I heard a gentleman that was doing a podcast. He was talking about mysonne and the fact that mysonne gave away turkeys. And he said that was nothing because mysonne wasn't doing nothing but giving away turkeys that someone gave him to give away. Hey, check this out. Last I checked, nobody cared. Those families that was eating turkey and getting turkey in their bellies, they didn't care where them turkeys came from. And the fact that somebody donated those turkeys to mysonne to give away and he chose to give those turkeys away to the community to put food into people's bellies in a situation where people don't have jobs right now because of COVID, are struggling because of COVID and having a hard time finding food to be able to feed their family. And he was able to use his relationships and connections and organizational affiliations to be able to get turkeys to feed the community, right? We should be applauding that. So for the person that talked about these turkeys as if they're nothing, I want to ask you how many turkeys you gave away at Thanksgiving. How many turkeys are you going to give away this Thanksgiving? It's easy to talk on social media, but much harder to walk and fight. It's easy to criticize the work of someone else when you're doing nothing. Before you criticize, try first to get active in the process. Gain an understanding of everything that goes into it, and then render an opinion. Short of that, you are just a distraction. A distraction who lacks depth and experience at that. So I just wanted to render my opinion on this situation. Again, this is my opinion. This has nothing to do with the National Action Network and no other organizations that I'm directly or affiliated in. And it definitely has nothing to do with any organizations that are mentioned in this live. Listen, this is solely my opinion. This is Fredrick D. Scott's opinion of the situation, right? So I just want to put that out there for the record again. Hey, listen, around here we always hashtag get real woke. And when I come up here and drop this game, I'm always dropping a hashtag for the free. So feel free to like, subscribe, follow, and share this information with anybody that you think needs to hear it, anybody that you think needs to benefit. Because the more people that we get eyes on the content, the more people are able to benefit. And with that said, I'm up out of here.